regular version first.
All right, guys, welcome to a special holiday edition of Redistricting Radar. Tonight we're going to be going over two states, Iowa and Kansas, both of which have four districts, both of which will not be losing or gaining any seats in reapportionment next year. And we're going to be going over how the redistricting rules work for both these states and showing you our maps for both of them. These are going to include fair maps as well as GOP gerrymanders. We also might have our normal guest, Armin Thomas, come on later with his maps. We're going to wait and see. But for now, it's just Eric and me. So we're going to start that off. So we're going to look at Iowa first. Iowa has four districts, as you know. Currently, Iowa is essentially their districts are set up almost if you took a square and you drew four even lines around it. It's definitely, ever since they lost their fifth district, the style of drawing that they've been using in Iowa. And in Iowa, the legislature is responsible for drawing the maps, but the legislature has to look at it with nonpartisan intent. And Iowa also doesn't have county splits in its map, so we try to get the deviation as low as possible without splitting counties and without showing inherent partisan intent in our drawing of the maps. So real quick, just to go over the Iowa congressional delegation going into the next election. This election cycle, as you know, Steve King lost his primary to Randy Feenstra back in June. So Randy Feenstra will be entering Congress. He had a very easy 20-point victory, not a controversial Republican, over J.D. Scholten. So he'll be in Congress, and that is the district in the northwest corner of the state, the most Republican district in the state. Right below that is actually going to be the district of what will be the only Democrat left in Iowa's congressional delegation. Cindy Axne, elected in 2018 from strong support in the Des Moines area, which is Polk County. She did well in Polk County again this time, and it was enough to carry her over the line by about a percentage point and a half against David Young, the congressman whom she defeated in 2018. So that was a rematch race. So,
and it's worth noting. Should we show the map for the people actually, so we can have?
Yeah, let bring that. I'm sorry, bring that up, and I'll keep explaining.
So the big thing with some of the districts is there is an unusual, because they have this system of having the maps done where they have to be basically 100% organized by, by no county splits. There is some weird stuff. Exactly. Like for example, Ames County or Ames Story County is a university town, but it's in 4, which is the most conservative district in the state by a substantial margin. So
that's a good point. I'll let you go through some of that in a second. Let me just finish talking about the congressional delegation they're going to have. So as I just said, Cindy Axne won a rematch victory against David Young. Essentially, as a Democrat, the only county you need to win, as I was saying, is Polk County. You can lose all the other rural, heavily Republican counties outside of there. And again, that's the real bright spot for Iowa Democrats going forward. Iowa Democrats are not happy about the results in Districts 1 and 2, both of which flipped to the Republicans. District 1, Abby Finkenauer, who was the freshman congresswoman there who beat Rod Blum back in 2018 by a pretty substantial margin. She ended up losing narrowly in an upset to Ashley Hinson, another female Republican candidate, one of many that were elected in the last election cycle just last month. And right below in Iowa's second district is a squeaker, a bigger upset than Iowa 1. Marionette Miller Meeks, and this is her third bid for Congress, defeated Rita Hart. And this was the open seat of Democrat Dave Lobsack, who's held the seat since 2006 and has always outrun the top of the ticket. He retired this year. And that race came down to what appears to be 6 votes at this point. And there's been some litigation, particularly on the Hart campaign, attempting to overturn the results of the election. But unlike New York 22, where we really don't know what the hell is going on, and there isn't really very much consensus about what's going on at this point, Iowa 2 is pretty much said and done at this point, and a win is a win. And we at Elections Daily, and even the people at the Des Moines Register, a paper that was providing its wholehearted support for Rita Hart, actually wrote a scathing op-ed calling out Rita Hart and saying that it was hypocritical for her to challenge the results of the election. So this is actually the closest House race since 1984 in Indiana, where a race was decided by 4 votes. The last time, for perspective, that we've had a race for the House decided by under 100 votes was in Connecticut in 2006. And to top that and make this House cycle even more interesting, we have 2 races decided by not less than 100 votes, not less than 50 votes. But in this case, we have a New York 22 race where Tenney, last time I checked, was up by 22 votes, and a second district in Iowa where Meeks is up by 6 votes. So two races
Mhm.
decided by just raise within margins. It's an election lover's dream, honestly, to see such close elections. And that's going to be the Iowa delegation, barring any somehow Hart litigation, whatever. Barring any, unless Hart like pulls out some miracle, makes up some fake evidence, and manages to convince a court, which is highly unlikely. It's going to
Or
be a
more,
3-1
yeah, or
Republican.
more likely Congress, which is where she's actually going for, is trying to get
Yes, I
Congress
mean,
to
yeah, she's
overturn the
going to try and
results.
convince Congress to seat her. And
Hmm.
again, this is something they tried to do in Indiana in the 1984 election.
And
You ended up
succeeded.
having. I'll actually get back to that later when we get to the second district because it's kind of a fun little trivia thing. So if we have extra time, but since we're sticking to redistricting, I'll let Eric do any additional thoughts about the map and some of the oddities of the map, which are going to become necessary because you can't split counties. And then after that, both of us are going to go through our maps. So Eric, take it away.
Yeah. So when we say that you can't split counties in Iowa's map, normally this is not a big deal. A lot of states actually have state level maps where basically where in these state level maps for state legislative districts, if you look at it in that particular way, they're not allowed to split counties. But in state legislature districts, you're able to essentially uh, deviate 5% above and 5% below the average number of people needed to be in the seat, right? So if you need to have 100 people in the seat, you can have either 95 in some seats or 105 in some seats. For Congress, that's more like 99. And ideally, it's 100. You want exactly the same number of people in every seat. So most states do not have a whole county rule for Congress. Iowa does. Iowa can get away with this because they have a lot of counties. But because you can't split any counties, that means the map has to be intensely geometric. It
Yeah.
has to kind of make some decisions that don't make a whole lot of sense from a community of interest standpoint. In particular, the big ones people complain about is Story County going into the 4th district. The 4th is the most Republican district in the state. In fact, Republicans can win Iowa just by winning the 4th district by a substantial enough margin.
Just
It's
a quick
basically.
add on, it's kind of like Arkansas's second district back when Democrats still won Arkansas
Mhm.
statewide. If a Republican had a narrow victory in a statewide race in Arkansas, oftentimes they could do it simply by winning Iowa too.
Yeah, exactly. And we saw this in the
Or sorry,
2018
Arkansas
gubernatorial
too, not
race.
Iowa too. Sorry about
Yeah,
that.
sorry. We saw this in the 2018 gubernatorial races where the incumbent Republican Kim Reynolds only won the 4th district. It's the only seat she won in the state. But she won it by a good enough margin and only narrowly lost the other 3 districts, which
Yeah.
all skew about a couple points more Democratic than the state as a whole, which meant she was able to win. So imagine how much more Republican this district would be then if Ames was not in it. Ames is a college town. It's a liberal city. On the other hand,
Yeah, if
Polk
Ames were
County,
not in the district, it would essentially be the
yeah,
definition of a vote sink,
yep.
which
But
we've
here's the
seen on.
other one. Yeah. On the flip side is Polk County. Polk County is urban. Polk County is Des Moines. It's the most liberal area of Kansas outside of maybe Iowa City, and Lynn County, that area.
Yeah.
But it's stuck with all of these suburban counties as well as these rural counties in Council Bluffs, Nebraska, which is on the other side of Omaha. So basically, this seat, which really should be more Democratic than it is actually a competitive swing district.
And
And on
again,
the other
there's
hand,
only one
yeah.
reason why it's a competitive swing district, and it is Polk County there with Des Moines, which makes up the entirety of the Democratic vote. And for
Mhm.
a Democrat like Cindy Axne to win by a point or two district wide, which she did last time and did in 2018 and did this time against David Young, you have to put up a very large margin in Des Moines. Typically, you have to win Polk County in her case by about 15 points, is how much she won
Mhm.
it by, and then you can lose the rest of the district, and particularly those rural counties. And granted, Sidney Axne did actually run ahead of Biden in those rural counties,
Mhm.
but still, you don't have to win those counties as a Democrat, and you're not going to win those counties. You don't even have to win the suburban counties to the east and to the south of Polk County. You really only have to win Polk.
Yeah, and you can see from this comparison I'm showing you right here is Story and Polk County right on top of each other are liberal counties, and then right next to it is Dallas County, which is a more suburban county that's
Mm-hmm.
trending Democratic. These 3 counties are all in different districts, when really you can make an argument they should be in the same district. The other side of it is also this side. The first is anchored around Cedar Falls and Cedar Rapids and Dubuque, the driftless region of Iowa, while the second is set around Iowa City and Davenport and some other areas around Des Moines. It's not to say this is a bad map. All things considered, it's actually been a very fair and a very competitive map overall, albeit with a very slight Democratic skew, because it is one Republican seat and
Can
three
you put
toss-up seats.
can you put the map up one more time?
Oh, sure.
There was one last thing I wanted to mention for the viewers about Iowa 3 that I think is
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. But
Iowa 1 and Iowa 3 actually.
yeah, but the big thing with this is again that this is a map which has one Republican district, one very Republican district that is not at risk
And
of flipping
essentially
unless you
three
have a Steve
toss-up
King.
districts.
Yeah, yeah, three, and these three districts are all a little bit to the left of the state, a point or
Yeah.
two to the left of where the state is. So not a
But
big deal, and certainly not something really to complain too much about, especially
yeah.
given Democrats don't have a safe district here.
And I mean, as Eric said, they are to the left of the state by a couple of points, but Republicans can still win them, as last month proved, or at least in
And they
District
have.
1 and 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I was just going to point out, if we look at District 3 over here, it's very interesting because I would have liked to do a study maybe when I would like in another decade, in 2030, I want to look back on this district and look at how particularly Dallas County and Pottawatomie County have trended, because both of these counties, especially Dallas, trended pretty significantly towards Joe Biden and the Democrats on the presidential election level. And Sydney Axney did outrun Biden and actually do decently in those counties as well. She didn't win them, but if the trends keep going like they're going now, and this district actually could become more Democratic, and I expect it to become more Democratic. So I think Iowa Republicans, if they want to approach the nonpartisan requirements of drawing maps with at least some bit of a Republican skew, might think a bit differently about keeping this district as it is, because it kind of would become the equivalent of a dummy Mander district in the future. It would definitely be the hardest district for them to win. And then could you go up to Iowa 1? I
Oh,
wanted to
sure.
point
And I'll
out.
just say one thing about this, which is that my map gets around this, but even then, not all of the seats are only likely Republican or lean Republican. They're
Yeah.
not specifically safe, which is a problem with Iowa,
And
given the whole county rule.
Iowa 1, historically, Iowa 1 has been the most democratic district. And I'm not talking about House results. I'm just talking about on paper. I mean, in 2008, Obama carried every county in Iowa 1. Now, looking at 2020, I mean, a county like Winneshiek was a big bellwether. People were wondering if it would be an Obama-Trump county that would flip back, and it didn't flip back. So if we're looking at this map, Black Hawk County and Lynn County, that's where you're getting your Democratic support in this district. And the reason Finkenauer lost this district is she lost Winneshiek this time. She only narrowly won Dubuque. She did obviously put up large margins in Black Hawk and Lynn. But again, the problem was she saw her margins decrease in the urban areas. But the real thing that killed her in the end was she decreased significantly by the tune of a couple points, single digits in a lot of these rural counties. And those performances matter, because when you're underperforming in the big city vote centers that make up the Democratic electorate, but you're also underperforming in the rural areas, it's not a good combination. Your universal underperformance from 2018. But I was just going to point out, looking at this district, that this one's had a shift towards the right, whereas a district like 3 has had a shift towards the left, as Polk County becomes more Democratic, a suburban county like Dallas County, even Warren County become more Democratic, and Council Bluffs, located in Pottawatomie County, that was another county that swung towards the Democrats. So before we show a map, I just want to share my screen real quick one more time, just to show you all what I'm on about here, at least on the presidential level, and why it'll be interesting, I think, to look back on Iowa's 3rd district in about a decade, in 2030, barring current trends if they keep up. But again, like I said here, this is Pottawatomie County. It swung towards Joe Biden. Dallas County, besides Johnson County, Dallas County actually swung toward the Democrats more than any other county at the presidential level in Iowa. So I think that's pretty telling as well. In fact, if we look at Dallas, it was only a narrow Trump county. Pottawatomie County, Biden cracked 40%. And if we look at Cindy Axney on our campaigns, I have to check real quick, but I was interested in really quickly looking at the difference in performance between 2020 and 2018. She actually won by less than she did last time, if you look at it. She won by about 2 points last time, only about 1.5 this time. But as you can see, she won Polk by the necessary 15% margin, and she came close in Dallas. So, long term, I think that you would see a Democrat winning Dallas County, even on the House level. So, I think that Republicans are going to take that into account when they look at drawing these maps. It's not, I'm just trying, my point essentially is that long term, it would not be a good idea to try and draw a Republican district, or at least one that leans Republican in a good environment that keeps, even if they draw it like with, I think it would be better if they just decided to give the Democrats a district in the middle of the state that would definitely take communities of interest into account. If it had counties like Dallas, Polk, Story County, that way you get a college town like Ames in the same district as um, there's another Democratic county like Polk with Des Moines, and a suburbanizing county like Dallas County.
And it's worth noting, of course, that the Republican who won in the first district, Ashley Hinton, actually lives in Lynn County, which is the most liberal
Exactly. Yeah.
portion. So that's another thing Republicans will have to consider in redistricting is that their incumbent lives in fact, her district that she represented in the legislature was actually the most out of all the districts, in the state. It's actually the most. It's one that flipped towards the Democratic Party. She left her district to
Mhm.
run in their
And
Congress.
she still lost Lynn County by 10 points, which was
Yeah.
less than Rod Blum did in 2018, but still.
Yeah. So that's just really one thing to keep an to keep on the back of your mind, I guess, when you're thinking about what these districts are going to look like, is that the Republicans are occasionally in pretty unusual places that they really don't want to have to worry about. So with that considered, do you want to go into our maps? I know I've got some stuff ready. I think you got some maps ready as well.
Yeah,
Um,
I was briefly just going to go through my Iowa map, and then we'll throw it over to you, and then Armin should be joining us shortly. So let me
yeah.
go through it. So Eric did the same thing, but I drew, I guess you could call it a fair map, and then I drew a Republican gerrymander. So this is my fair map, first of all. So let me just go through this one real quick. Turn on the counties. Computer's loading. Second. There we go. Okay. So first off, I'll point you to my first district up here in the corner. It keeps the same general shape as the current first district. Hold on, let me get this working. Yeah. So um, again, it keeps Lynn and Black Hawk County in the district, both of which would provide the mainstay of the Democratic support. And again, this is going to be the district of Ashley Hinson. So I kept Lynn County in the district because Hinson lives in Lynn County, which is ironic because it's the most Democratic part of the district, or one of them. And Hinson is a Republican, but like Eric said, that's where her state Senate district was, and it did flip towards the Democrats when she gave it up. The district does include a lot of these classic Obama counties, most of which, if they didn't, most of which at least voted for Obama one time, and most of them probably voted for Obama twice, if I remember correctly. So looking at this district, it historically would have been very Democratic, actually. If I load up, let me put on a data set if we have President 2008. Yeah, as you can see, President 2008, this district almost went to Obama by 20 points. But again, it's a different time. Trump would have carried this district by about 4 points. On the gubernatorial level, it just barely voted for Fred Hubble over Kim Reynolds. But again, that gubernatorial performance by Fred Hubble was good. Honestly, compared against the benchmark of performances we've seen by someone like Teresa Greenfield in the most recent Senate election, or even Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden in the most recent presidential contest in Iowa, I would say it's more likely than not that that would be a peak performance, only narrowly losing to Reynolds with about 47.5% of the vote. So this first district would be represented by Hinson. It would be competitive, but Hinson should be able to hold this district. And again, it does take Lynn County into account, which is her home, and it stretches up here. If I look over here, it does stretch up here to take in some of these more Republican counties, most of which, as I said, once were Obama counties, but now are reliably Republican. One of a good example is Winneshiek County, which has definitely seen a gigantic change over the last few years. It did vote for Finkenauer in 2018, and it voted for Rob Sand in the state auditor bid. But at the end of the day, Biden couldn't crack the trend in this district, and Trump, in this county, and Trump won it again. So I'll move on to District 2 now, which is down here. Very similar to District 1 in partisanship, and again, similar in shape. It does include Johnson County, where you're going to see the bulk of the Democratic vote. Wapello County is actually where Marionette Miller Meeks lives, so that's covered in the district. This would be a district that she would hold. This district was definitely more favorable for Fred Hubble in his gubernatorial bid, although McCain did do better here than he did up in the neighboring first district. But again, Obama's performance in the driftless area, as we've said, has to do a lot with him really just being an exceptional candidate in an exceptional environment in which he did very well in the Midwest. Um, Again, this district voted for Trump in 2016 by about 4 points, give or take a little bit under that. Very similar to the first district. So again, this is a competitive district. In a blue environment, it would definitely be a toss-up, and Democrats could win both of these seats. But ideally, on this fair map, both of these seats would usually lean towards the Republicans on the congressional level. I drew a third district here that leans towards the Democrats, mainly because I wanted to take communities of interest into account. So, like I was saying earlier, this is a nice, compact district. Not a significant amount of deviation. I did the best I could. It takes Polk into account, which is Des Moines, which is and has gotten more Democratic over the years and makes up for the majority. In fact, pretty much all the Democratic vote in the current third district. I kept Dallas in the district, which is a suburban county that is trending towards the Democrats. In fact, as I said, Joe Biden came just 2 points shy of actually winning this county. And I also included Warren, which is not as Democratic as Dallas. But again, this is one where we've also seen favorable trends for the Democrats. And I bunched in Story, which is currently in the 4th district, because Ames, Iowa, within Story County, like Eric said, it's a college town. It wouldn't make sense to have this in the 4th. So I just figured let's give it to Cindy Axne. So this district, you end up having a district that voted for Hillary Clinton by about 3 points. It voted for Fred Hubble by almost 10 points. And again, this district would be pretty reliably Democratic for Axne. She'd probably win by about 5 points, usually, maybe more. We'd have to see. But what I find interesting looking at the 2008 presidential results, just to see how the state has trended, this is actually fascinating to see. McCain, this is so far his best district, which is really ironic because today this would be the most Democratic district. But in terms of the presidential results back in 2008, this would have been the most Republican district. And we're looking at, as I said, big changes in counties like Dallas, Warren. Polk itself has gotten more Democratic compared to districts like 2 and especially 1, which is the quintessential Iowa driftless area district, where most of these rural Obama-Trump counties have just simply flown out of reach for the Democrats in recent years, especially at the federal level. And finally, 4, which is essentially a vote sink. I mean, obviously, no Democrat's going to do as well as Barack Obama did in this district. It takes in the more rural counties of the 3rd district, as well as Potawatomi, which is trending towards the Democrats. And, Joe Biden did improve off of Hillary Clinton's numbers out here in western Iowa. It was actually pretty much the only part of the state that actually got slightly bluer, whereas he declined from Clinton's numbers out in the eastern part of the state, like I showed you here. I mean, this pretty much sums it up. He did improve out here. Let me find my map. But where is it? There it is. Sorry about that. But again, this is the Randy Feenstra seat. He represented a district up here in the state legislature, beat Steve King in the primary. Obviously, he's not going to have any trouble winning this seat. Hillary Clinton couldn't even crack 30% of the vote here. Looking at how Biden overperformed Clinton on the presidential level out in western Iowa, I'd say Biden cracks 30% here. But again, it's not going to be anything significant. So in a good year for Republicans, this thing would generate a 3-1 delegation for the Republicans. It takes incumbency into account. The deviation is within the court limits. It is approached relatively from a nonpartisan perspective. It's compact, and there are no county splits. So this is essentially what I would consider to be the fair map. I'll quickly show you the GOP gerrymander, which, if I recall, also takes incumbency into account. I think. I don't remember. I need to check. Actually, I didn't fix the numbering on here. So just to our viewers, this district up here is supposed to be 4. And this is supposed to be 3 because I wanted to keep it geographically similar, even though Polk County is in the 3rd in this case. So, again, all of these districts, well, or at least most of them, 1 is probably the one that Democrats have the best shot at winning. It still leans towards the Republicans. It's actually slightly less Republican than the one on my other map, but it does still include Lynn County. So Ashley Hinson would be representing this district successfully. Again, it voted for the President Trump in 2016 by a little bit under 4 points. But again, I do think Ashley Hinson will be able to win this, especially in a good environment for the Republicans. So there's not really much else to say there. The 2nd district, As you can see here, again, this was a 5.1 victory for Trump in 2016, so more Republican than the second district on my other map. It does include Wapello County, which is Marionette Miller Meeks' home, and it swings all the way up here to take in some of these more Republican rural Iowa counties that would be in the split between the current fourth and the current first that help offset the heavy Democratic influence from a county like Johnson County right over here. Uh, Let me briefly go to the third district. The third district does include the community of interest that we talked about. It includes Story County up here with Ames, Polk County down here with Des Moines, and Dallas, suburban county. It also includes heavily Republican rural counties like Sioux up here, which is actually the most Republican county in Iowa and one of the most Republican counties in the nation. Counties around it are very similar. So this map would essentially screw over Cindy Axne either way, because Randy Feenstra could run in this district because it includes his home up here in the very tip northwest corner of Iowa, or theoretically, if he wanted an even safer seat, he could run in the fourth. Although at the end of the day, Trump still won this district by about 7.5 points. So this district's not going to flip Democratic. I would. It's easily a likely Republican seat in most environments. Could very well be safe if Democrats have poor candidate recruitment and the environment's good for the Republicans. And the final district is the fourth district. Again, Cindy Axne could run in this third district. Feenstra could jump down here, or he could run in this third. Feenstra would beat Axne here. Even in a blue environment, I would not see Axne winning the seat. It's possible because it's only Trump plus 7.5. It could flip in a big blue wave here, but again, this is not normally a district where the Democrats would be looking at having their hopes brought up. Definitely not as much as the other map, which clearly established the Cindy Axne district in the middle of the state. But this last district, very proud of that low deviation. But this is essentially a vote sink. I mean, I'm not really going to beat around the bush. It's slightly more Democratic than the other district, but still, Trump won this seat by 22 points, double digits. This seat would be safe Republican. So this would usually generate a pretty reliable 4-0 Republican majority, and it protects incumbency for the Republican members. So again, this is effectively the Republican gerrymander I put together here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everything looks pretty reasonable. I'll go ahead and show my maps as well.
All
Very
right, go
similar
ahead.
in terms of the look. I have mine are a little bit different. Though in particular, I'll go ahead and pull my screen share up here so you can see. Where is it? There it is. All right. So the first map I'll show you is what I'll consider it the fair map. I don't necessarily think this is a 2-to-2 map is the fairest in Iowa at this point, but I think you can make a solid argument that Lynn and Cedar Rapids and Iowa City are community of interest along with Dubuque. I think you can make that argument. So this is what that would be. This would be basically the Democratic happiest map, and it would probably be the one that people would be most happy with. Specifically, the Stephen Wolfs of the world would probably really like this map because it would ensure 2 Democratic representatives. So I'll go through them in order right here. I'll turn off the partisan fairness numbers right here. So the first district would have voted for 2016 would have voted for Hillary Clinton by around 7 points. Would have voted for Hubble by 13 or 12 in the gubernatorial race. It would have voted for Chuck Grassley in the Senate race, however, but he won the state by a substantial margin, so that probably wouldn't matter. The second is a Republican district. Again, you'll look at the numbers right here. Trump wins it by double digits. Kim Reynolds almost wins it by double digits. There's not really any Democratic strongholds here aside from maybe, Waterloo. And this is just a Republican trending seat as a whole. So Marionette Miller Meeks would have no problem holding this. This third district right here would actually be only the second most Democratic in the state. This would have gone to Hillary Clinton by around 4 points, and would have gone to Hubble by around 11. This is certainly a winnable sort of district for Republicans in the right year, but it's really not probably one that would be a target most of the time. And then finally, the fourth is the big Republican vote sink. 64% of the vote for Donald Trump, and then 63% for Hubble, or not for Hubble, for Kim Reynolds. And obviously Chuck Grassley gets nearly 70% of the vote here because there's really not any Democrats. Although it's worth noting that in 2008, Obama would have only lost the seat by around 5 points, which is really kind of impressive given how it's swung so rapidly in recent years. Finally, I'd probably consider this the most likely version if they were going to draw a map, which would be kind of a commission gerrymander of sorts. The goal here is basically to keep the cities together And the result is a map that favors Republicans overall, but does give a safe seat to Democrats. So the first district right here go is about a district that would have voted for Trump by around 10 points and would have voted for Kim Reynolds by around 3. It has Cedar Rapids, it has Mason City, Waterloo, Fort Dodge, but also a lot of really, really Republican areas. There's just not a lot of Democratic strength here at this point. I don't even think Finkenauer could have won this district in in 2018. And Ashley Hinson from Lynn County would certainly be very safe in the seat right now. The second district is the Democratic vote sink. It votes for Hillary Clinton by almost, or actually over 10 points, and it votes for Hubble by around 17 points. Even Chuck Grassley only manages to win it by 7. Cindy Axne will be very safe in this district. Because of the whole county rule, obviously you have to throw in some Republican districts. If there was no whole county rule, you could just go ahead and throw Story County, which is in the 4th district, in there. But there's not really a way to have Story County, Des Moines, and Iowa City in the same district, unfortunately, for Republicans. The third becomes a very, very Republican seat if you look at this right here. Votes for Donald Trump by 14 points and would have voted for Kim Reynolds by around 8. Obviously, Democrats wouldn't have a shot in the seat at this point. It does have Davenport, it does have Dubuque, some traditionally Democratic areas in the Driftless region, but it's simply not enough at this point. And then finally, the 4th district is fairly Republican still. If you look at it, it's a Trump plus 24 seat, and Kim Reynolds would have won it by 17. It does have Story County, as I said before, and McCain would have won it by 5. But this is not a district Democrats would have a prayer in competing in. Although they probably might have been able to win it had it been in 2018, the Steve King versus Schulten race, where Steve King was very, very unpopular in his seat for obvious reasons, and only won by his Republican affiliation. So that's ultimately, that map right there. And I do have one more map to show. I put it in the trash, but I think I'm going to revive it. Is the disgusting gerrymander is what I'll call it. This map is awful. It's terrible by so many metrics. I don't even think all the incumbents live in the seats. But if you look at the numbers right here, Trump wins every seat by around 10 points, which is pretty impressive. And Hubble only wins the 3rd district because it has Iowa. It has that Iowa. Make sure that's Iowa City, because it has Cedar Rapids in it, and so Fred Hubble would have won it by about 0.4. So I guess you could say it could backfire, but I mean at that point it really does not matter. That would be a kind of if Rita Hart is seated against the will of the popular vote, that is probably the map Republicans will draw when they gut the commission, and just specifically do that to get rid of Rita Hart as revenge for the perceived slight. So those are my maps for Iowa. Any thoughts on them or anything?
Yeah, I think they're very good. I think they, reflect the fact that Iowa has a Republican lean and a Republican legislature, and they're going to take that into account. But yeah, I think well done all around.
Yeah, I think they're good as well. I think you took a similar approach to creating a central district in the state on your fair map similar to what I did with Cindy Axne, which I like as well. So, Armin, do you want to show us your maps for Iowa?
Yeah, sure. Let me go ahead right now. There we go. All right. Can you all see?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this one is the fair map. I think we all did pretty similar things here. But it's clear that the divide in Iowa is now increasingly going to be more urban, rural versus eastern, western. So I guess right off the bat, we should start with 3. This basically takes in the majority of the Des Moines area. And you see Clinton won it by 4. Hubble won it by double digits. So, this would be a pretty safe seat for Cindy Axne long term, especially with how the trends are going. Then 4 is the big Western one, as always. It's not really it's still a super safe Republican seat, and anybody not named Steve King is going to easily win this seat. Randy Feenstra would be, he's a bit, his base up there is, it's much less powerful because the district is much more diffuse over a lot more counties now. But, he'd still hold this down because he's going to be very conservative like that. I think more interesting is what everyone decided to do with 1 and 2. So what I went and doing is a mix of historical precedent with keeping Cedar Rapids and Iowa City in two separate districts, but then also I wanted to try and keep all of these cities on the river: Davenport, Dubuque, Clinton, Muscatine, Burlington, all of those in the same district. And so you end up with this district that has a lot of these ancestrally Democratic areas, and then some of these really blood red counties down here. And especially Ottumwa, that's Wapello County, I think. That's where Marionette Miller Meeks is from. So she would be there. And I think this map does protect all incumbents. So it works. It works nicely that way. So if you turn on partisan lean, what? Oh, this is for governor. Okay. Yeah. So as you can see, this too though would be a toss up, and probably Trump would have won it this year, and Marionette Miller Meeks would have flipped it. This one is basically the inverse of everything else. It's much more rural. It's Trump plus 9 roughly after Obama won it by 14. So that just shows you how much things have gone south for Democrats in Iowa. So I guess if you take a look at Trump, that is the margin. Clinton barely won it there, and Biden probably lost it. And then Grassley, yeah, you see, he did very well there. And then of course, the good old days of Obama cleaning up in eastern Iowa. So that is where things are with this map, analytics wise. Um, Okay, well, there are no minorities in Iowa, but in every other metro it seems to do very, very well. Um, so yeah. I mean, all in all, I think this is a good map. So why don't we go to the Republican gerrymander? So voila, here is the Republican gerrymander. Um, as I said before, that the urban-rural divide is supplanting the east-west divide, but it still persists. So the simple, most easy way to gerrymander Iowa is to just slice Iowa from east to west, like I did here. Now I did concede one seat to Democrats here. And this takes in Des Moines and Iowa City, which are the two biggest uh, sources of Democratic voting power in the state, and I put them in one district. And as you can see, Hubble won it by almost 18, 19 points. Even Hillary won it by double digits. So this is a super safe seat. But then when you look at this one, see Trump plus 21, Trump plus 19, and for this fourth one, Trump plus 10. But it's got a lot of really red rules in here, and these are only going to get redder. And as far as I know, Randy Feenstra would be in this district, Ashley Hinton would be in this district, and Marionette Miller Meeks is from Wapello County over here, so she would be totally fine. But yeah, when you turn on the partisan lean, that is what you end up getting. I mean, of course, you can see how the trends have happened, because 8 to 12 years ago, this was a dummy-mander, but it evidently would not be now. But yeah, and when you turn on 2018 governor, you can see, things got close, but ultimately Iowa's red lean still held, and things still held for the Republicans. But yeah, these are the maps I have made.
I like both maps. I just wanted to briefly think we should address two questions in the comments. First off, someone asked how much Joe Biden won my Iowa 3 by on my first fair map, and the answer is Joe Biden didn't win it. Trump won that third district in the center of the state, 51. I think it was like 51 point. 51.3 to 48.7 is how much he won that by. So he won all 4 districts on my fair map, and obviously won the districts on the GOP gerrymander by more than that. Just to answer your question, and Clinton did win it last time, but it's important to remember that last time there was more of a third party presence in the presidential race, and the third district that I drew, 8% of the votes there were cast a third party. So Clinton's win there may not have happened had there not been such a third party presence in that election. And our second comment is it illegal to split counties?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now,
Yeah,
granted,
pretty much.
what would precede it? Now, imagine a scenario where there are not that many counties in Iowa. Let's say you have 20 counties. And in order to create a map, you can't create a map that has, within that 0.1% threshold or so. Like, we're talking maybe under 1,000 people is the threshold you can go over. If at that point there was a county split rule, And then the Supreme Court would come in and say, no, you have to one man, one vote. You have to have
Yeah.
a certain
Iowa has
threshold.
99 though, so they
Yeah,
shouldn't. They're all very
yeah,
small populations, so you
yeah,
shouldn't run into that problem.
yeah. So yeah, but
Well,
in
no,
other
there
states, yeah,
shouldn't be any problem at all with not splitting counties. You
mhm,
can generally get very low deviation, definitely within the court limit of that 0.1% threshold without splitting
yeah.
counties in Iowa.
Yeah, but again, I'm just pointing out nationally, a lot of states would have this problem where they would have to split counties, and that, or they would basically, if the conflict is splitting counties or meeting the, the deviation threshold, then you have to meet the deviation threshold. But thankfully, Iowa does not have that problem, and so Iowa is able to have a map where no counties are split. Even though, as you mentioned before, it kind of results in districts that don't often make the most sense from a community of interest standpoint. Although without a doubt they look very nice. I mean, it's objectively quite pleasing to have a map of Iowa where every quadrant of the state has its own district, even if the vast majority of the third lives in Des Moines, and the rest of the district can literally vote for Republicans, and if you win Des Moines by enough, you win the district. Like
Yeah, you
that
just
looks
have to
great.
win. All you have to do to win the district is win Polk County by 15 points, and you'll pull out like a 1.5
Yeah,
point district wide victory.
yeah, and I'm not complaining. That's not necessarily unfair. It's just that's a consequence of a county split rule. If they hadn't had to deal with that, they could have put Story County in there. They could have, made a more reasonable split. But because of this
That
rule,
said,
they're
also
not
in
really able to.
third, getting like 46% in Dallas and like 40 in Potawatomi helps too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So we'll go on now to our next state, unless people have any other comments about Kansas, or sorry, Iowa, and we'll go into Kansas, which is actually one of the more fascinating states to look at
Yeah, I'll let
in
Eric
recent
take this one
elections.
because I have to fix my map first. So, Eric, you
Yeah.
can go ahead.
So Kansas is a Republican state. It's obviously a very Republican state still. Donald Trump won it by a substantial margin in 2016, and he still won it by what you could probably call a substantial margin this time, but it was a substantially reduced margin as well. Joe Biden is the first Democrat to crack 40% in Kansas since 2008, since Obama, and he managed to flip a lot of counties
And I
that
just
have
want to
not.
add that long term, even though people were smoking trends on Kansas this cycle, particularly with the Senate race where Barbara Bollier was basically Phil Bredesen too. But just to be fair to the Democrats who do have hopes about Kansas, it was to the left of Missouri this year, which is a good sign long term over the next decade or two. That
Yeah,
it
we're
may be.
talking about like what we're talking about is in 2016, Donald Trump won the state 56.2 to 35.7.
Yeah.
That's a very large margin. That's over 20 points. This time he only won at 56.2. Again, his margin only increased by 0.02%, while Joe Biden increased to 41.5%. So that's a shift of over 6 percentage points. Mainly because of shifts in the Kansas City area as well as areas like Manhattan, Kansas, that have become more urban and more democratic. But the long and short of it is this is still a Republican state, and like a lot of Republican states, has a very Republican legislature. In fact, a supermajority of the legislature are Republicans. This is important because the governor, Barbara Bollier, is a Democrat, and she's obviously what we invested
Laura
in Donald.
Kelly.
Yeah, sorry, Laura Kelly. Who did I say?
Jackson was very happy hearing Governor Barbara Bollier.
No, sorry. They're all the same. They're generic white women. I mean, sorry, Kansas.
No, don't sweat it. It's okay. I've made
Yeah,
mistakes. I'm pretty sure I called Rick Scott the governor of Florida by accident once.
yeah, the senator from Florida, and also Thanos. But basically, Laura Kelly is the governor, and she has veto power. There are two complications of this, though. One is that Republicans have a very divided caucus in Kansas. Kansas is one of the few states you could look at and say, yeah, there are legitimate rhinos in Kansas. There are legitimate people who would be Democrats in any other state, but are Republicans in Kansas and often vote like Democrats in the rest of the state on substantial issues. Barbara Bollier was one of them. When she was a Republican, she actually voted to the left of the average Democrat in the Senate, which makes no surprise that she switched parties. The surprising thing was after she switched parties, she actually started voting more conservatively than she did as a Republican, probably in preparation for the Senate run. But that's one factor here, which is that to override Laura Kelly's veto, all of those moderate Republicans will need to be on board. And in many ways, they're functionally Democrats. I don't think it's unfair to say that. I don't think it's unfair to mention that. There's issues in Rhode Island.
No, I mean, no,
with
let's just be blunt. We shouldn't sugarcoat it. Like I say all the time, they're fake Republicans.
Yeah,
It's
it's like the people in Kansas who time after time have started to caucus with Democrats. Can you really call them Republicans at that point, or actually say that count them as such when we're talking about organizational purposes? I would argue in Kansas that you basically have a caucus of Democrats who are a very small minority Then you have maybe a 25-30% fraction of Republicans who are either moderates or straight up suburban people, although a lot of them were defeated by actual Democrats. And then you have a lot of Republicans who are absurdly conservative, very conservative, like the Republicans you would expect in the state. Trump won by 15 points. So the long and short of it is we have no idea what Kansas is going to look like. A lot of these Republicans are in vulnerable districts. So even if they are moderates, they may be willing to be on board and say, hey, you draw me a safer seat, I'll vote for a map that gets rid of the current incumbent representative in the the third district, which is Sharice Davids. A progressive sort of Democrat, although one that's certainly getting along with her Republican colleagues in a lot of ways. She's developed close ties with she's developed close ties with a lot of the Native American members of Congress, including
And
the Republicans.
she did win by slightly more this last election than she did in 2018.
Yeah, I mean, she's basically set herself up very well into the districts.
I wouldn't say it ended up being crystal ball. I mean, no offense, we all thought she would win by more than she did, even though she did win by more than 2018. Mm-hmm. But it ended up looking more like a likely Democratic result rather than a full-on safe district result. But yeah, I think a lot of that comes from, honestly, the Democrats not doing quite as well in Johnson County as we all expected going into the election.
Yeah. But I'll go ahead and pull up the map for you so you can see what we're talking about here. And I'm also going to pull up the state map so we can show you the swings, because the swings have been pretty crazy in Kansas. People have been talking about what's the matter with Kansas, what's going on there. Well, it's all stuff that's going on in a lot of other states. Suburban voters shifting Democratic, rural voters shifting Republican. Really not much more to say about it than that. But we'll go ahead and start with the map of the congressional districts. They're numbered very weirdly. The first district is known as the Big First. It stretches through all of the rural areas: Dodge City, Garden, Liberal, which is actually a conservative city. It's in Seward County. I had to mention that. I had to mention Jackson's.
That's one of my favorite forces in the whole country, honestly, just having a city called Liberal as Republican.
Yeah. And then it stretches into Manhattan, Kansas, which is home to, I believe, Kansas State University.
That's Riley County is actually the only Democratic county in the current first. And they just elected a new representative, Tracy Mann, because Roger Marshall's ascending to the Senate, like many first district representatives before him. But Marshall's in Saline County, which is a little bit to the southwest of Riley.
And the reason it's known as the Big First is not just because it's big in terms of its geography, but it's also big in terms of those representatives.
One more fact that people want to know. Joe Biden is the first Democrat on the presidential level to ever win Riley County in its history. It's never voted for a Democrat for president.
It's a historic Yankee county. It's
never voted Democratic.
Yeah, and he won it, which is, I mean, to his credit, that's pretty impressive for a Democrat to win.
It was kind of similar to Johnson, which hadn't voted Democratic since the Wilson administration over 100 years ago.
Yeah, but again, going back to the reason it's called the Big First is not just because it's geographically quite big. I mean, it is. I mean, you can look at it; it's the biggest district in the state. It's also big in terms of who it's sent to Congress. People like Bob Dole, people like Pat Roberts, and now Roger Marshall. All of them became senators from Kansas, and in particular, Bob Dole became a very well-known senator, one of the leaders of the moderate, debt-focused wing of the party, who were
presidential nominee too.
Yeah, and I say moderate. He wasn't a moderate, but he was in the wing of the party. There were basically two wings of Republicans at that point. There were the Jack Kemp wing of the party, which wanted tax cuts at the expense of everything else, even if it meant higher deficits. And then you had the Bob Dole wing, which were very much focused on fiscal moderation, both in terms of having reasonable tax rates that kept the income coming in and also not spending as much. So their priority was more focusing on keeping the debt at a lower level. Obviously, the Kemp wing is one out. I consider myself part of the Kemp wing personally because I'm in the tax cut camp. But Bob Dole's strand of conservatism did actually unite itself into a single ticket. Bob Dole and Jack Kemp on the same ticket in '96, and they got demolished by Bill Clinton. Although Bob Dole did win Kansas. Obviously. The fourth is based in Wichita, but it also stretches into a lot of these other counties around here that aren't really tied to Wichita, like Kinsley area, Edwards, Pratt County, Barber. The second is a weird district because it has Topeka, Kansas. It has Shawnee County, which is the state capital. It's a moderate area. I believe it voted for Joe Biden narrowly. And then it has Lawrence, Kansas, Douglas County, which is home to Lawrence, obviously, University of Kansas, which is the most liberal city in Kansas, probably one of the most liberal cities in the Midwest in general. But the rest of the seat is actually really, really conservative. This is where Chris Kobach came from. This was his strongest district in the Republican primary. So that's the conflict here, is this sort of liberal area that's kind of stretching along that Topeka Topeka to Manhattan line, while also including these really Republican exurban and suburban areas. Then finally, the third, which has Kansas City, the I believe it's the biggest city in the state, and then Johnson County, which is suburban, the largest county in the state, and a new county for Biden, a county that he had won that really shifted Democratic. I don't even think Trump got close in this county. This is basically the home of the traditional moderate liberal Republican in Kansas. Someone who is more of a definitely more willing to buck their party and also definitely not as invested in the Republican Party as an institution. The current incumbents, obviously, the first will have Tracy Mann instead of Roger Marshall. The second, Steve Watkins, was defeated in a primary by the state auditor.
Jake LaTurner.
Yep, Jake LaTurner. This district was won considerably by Jake LaTurner. It's been traditionally more competitive, but I think it's safe to say it's no longer in that category. Obviously, Sharice Davids is the third, one of the first Native American woman to represent Kansas, a fairly liberal member, although one that gets along with Republican colleagues. And obviously, you kind of have to when you're from Kansas if you want to get anything done. And then finally, Ron Estes from the 4th District, not to be confused with the other Ron Estes who was running Kansas, because there are multiple Ron Esteses in the 4th District.
Wasn't his opponent in one of the elections? Yeah, he ran against Ron Estes. That's what I remember that.
He had to distinguish himself by putting they let him distinguish himself by calling him Representative Rob Estes on the, I believe it was either the primary or the general, just so people didn't get confused as to which.
No, it
Ron
was
Estes
general. Remember, he did run against a guy Ron Estes in the general.
Yeah. But this is basically, so this is the map from DRA.
Oh, real quick, wanted to answer another question about Jerry Moran. And yes, I believe so, because the 1st District has sponsored, like we said, multiple Republican senators. Pat Roberts for one, Bob Dole for one, and now Roger Marshall.
Yeah. Although I think technically, I'm trying to think. Pat Roberts is the one who doesn't actually live in Kansas. He lives in
Not anymore,
Virginia.
but he did live in well, it's not Malcolm. There are plenty of senators who don't live in their home states.
Yeah, sure. So the 1st District is obviously very Republican, gave 69% of the vote to Trump, undoubtedly a nice margin for him. It gave 75% of the vote, 76% of the vote to the Senate candidate there, Republican side. And it's very Republican. Although in the 2018 gubernatorial election, the Republican only got 51% here. 12% went to Greg Orman. This is probably due to Manhattan, made it a little bit more Democratic, and also some residual, rural Democrats that kind of represent the lighter red areas.
Mm-hmm.
The second is, again, it's a district that voted for Trump by 18, voted for Republicans, by 20 points otherwise. It's traditionally a safer seat, although it's been competitive, obviously, because of Topeka, Kansas, because of those areas around there, Topeka and Lawrence mainly. Although, if you look at the 2018 election, Laura Kelly did win an outright majority here. She actually won the seat by almost 10 points. Pretty impressive, probably because of Topeka and Lawrence.
But it's also important to note that that's pretty much the ceiling for the Democrats in the state.
Yeah, Democrats thought they had a candidate who would win in the district in 2018 in Paul Davis, the former gubernatorial candidate, but he lost the seat narrowly to Steve Watkins in an upset, one of the few Republican upsets of the cycle.
Yeah.
Obviously, the 3rd District is, if you look at it historically, this is a seat that voted for John McCain by one point. It voted for Mitt Romney by 9. But then you look at 2016, it voted for Hillary Clinton by a point. It voted for Republicans in the Senate race, but in the gubernatorial race, it voted for the Democrat by almost 20 points. And that's really more like where the seat is at right now. It's not quite that Democratic, but it's one that Republicans will have a hard time winning, because not only is there Kansas City, they also lost that bulwark of Republicanism around Overland.
One of the big problems in that 3rd District, it's not Johnson County alone, because if you gerrymander the seat, which you'll see on my map, with some of the more Republican rural counties below Johnson County, suburban county, and rural counties. The big problem there is Wyandotte County, which is heavily Democratic. Nearly 70% of the votes there are cast for the Democrats.
And that's honestly, Kansas City. Yeah.
That is essentially what you have to draw into Roger Marshall's, or they guess now Tracy. You'll see with my map, but you can't keep that in the 3rd District and expect it to be won by Republicans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so obviously that's an important district. And finally, the 4th District, which is the it's the median district in the state. Basically, this is a seat that voted for Donald Trump by 27 points. Voted for the Senate candidates by well over that margin, but it did only narrowly vote for Chris Kobach in 2018. Worth noting, Chris Kobach was a disaster of a candidate. Again, this is kind of the floor for Republicans in Kansas.
Really? Are you sure about that? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
think
If you
he
can't
was
tell,
part of, he was part of the Hall of Fame of wonderful candidates like Rick Saccone, Mark Harris,
yeah, Mo
Roy
Davis.
Moore.
Well,
Yep.
if Chris Kobach had been on the
Oh, he would have
ballot
won.
this time
He
in
would have
November,
won.
he
Yeah.
probably
Yeah,
would
he
have
probably would have
won.
won, but not
I
by
mean,
the
to be
margin
fair, Roy
most.
Moore would have won if he were in Alabama.
If he ran in the presidential year, yeah. But again, that's basically Kansas right now. And so
Hell, Rick
now,
Stone would have won too.
especially in this old district. But we'll go ahead and get into the maps. I think we kind of beaten around the bush enough on the numbers. Who wants to go first? I could go if
I'll, yeah, you go first.
yep. So
Sure.
I have two maps of Kansas. I have a fair map and I have an unfair map. I'll do the fair map first. This is actually kind of a map inspired by Jackson Bryman. I had been staunchly against this map for a long time because I thought it was really ridiculous to go along the corridor from the suburban areas around Kansas City to Manhattan. But looking at the voting trends, looking at the urbanization, I think it's kind of hard not to come to the conclusion that that is a distinct area and that does represent something in Kansas. So my map is actually takes a lot of inspiration from that. So basically, I'll show you the districts here. The first district is the big first again, although it's actually even bigger now. I guess what do you call it? The mega first now.
The greatest first.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
still
the
has
best
liberal. It
first.
still has Dodge City.
It
It
still has
stretches
liberal in it.
yeah, it still has liberal. It's more Republican now. It's actually a Trump plus 50 district, which is just wow.
Trump plus 50.
Yeah, although it's only Kobach plus 20. Again, Chris Kobach was not a good candidate.
How did Greg Orman do there?
He got around 11%. It looks like. Yeah, I think he probably did very well in
You have
liberal.
to get ready for the 2028 presidential matchup with the ticket being Rick Saccone and Chris Kobach.
Yeah, but this map basically takes in all of the rural areas I could. It even takes in these rural areas down here. I think they're more akin to these areas right here, and leaves kind of the metropolitan areas out of the picture. So the second district here votes for the Republican, votes for Donald Trump by around 15 points. It goes from Lawrence to Topeka to Manhattan. Although it still has a lot of those Republican areas around it. Still a pretty Republican-leaning seat. And it wouldn't have even voted if you look at the 2012 numbers. I actually want to show 2008 here to show what this looks like. Would have voted again for John McCain by around 7. In the 2018 gubernatorial race, Laura Kelly would have won it by around 13 points, which is pretty close to her statewide margin. This is probably a little bit to the left of Kansas, but I don't think it's unfair for Kansas to have a likely Republican seat, especially when it does take in that corridor right here. If you'll notice the highway right here, all the people in Kansas, they live in like this corridor right here from Lawrence to Topeka to Manhattan. It does include those two college towns, and it does kind of draw in the rest of those urban areas. The third, actually, I don't know why I did this. The third should be the third and the fourth should be swapped. I'm actually going to correct that real quick because this is going to bother me. Yeah, so the actual third right here is in Kansas City. It's Wyandotte County, Johnson County. A little bit of Johnson County around Gardner is not in the seat. I ultimately just chose to take that out. I could have taken it out of Wyandotte County, but I decided not to. This is still a McCain, Romney, Clinton district, although it's a little bit more favorable to Democrats this time. Sharice Davids would be very safe here, no problems at all. And finally, the fourth is actually a lot more compact because of population growth around Wichita. This is closer to the median seat. Trump plus 24. Laura Kelly actually narrowly wins this version of the fourth, but it's not a competitive district. Ron Estes would have no problem winning this map. And just to kind of show you it again, I think this is a pretty reasonable split for Kansas. You can make an argument that the second should still have Manhattan being in the first, and then have Topeka and Lawrence in the second, and then draw in the rest of the border with Missouri. But I think there's a really good case to be made that that corridor is a reasonable area to go through. So that's my fair map. What does my unfair map look like? Well, my unfair map is an abomination. It's pretty terrible for Democrats, and it's pretty terrible in general. You'll notice right here the big first now includes all of Kansas City. I'm sure they'll be very happy to be represented by Tracy Mann in this district. This is a district that Trump would win by 22 points. This is a district Laura Kelly would have actually won it by 3. Although, again, I'm not sure how much of that is the liberal or these voters for Greg Orman. But obviously, this has the most Republican portion of the state and the most Democratic portion of the state. And it balances out to be pretty Republican. The second has Topeka, it has Manhattan, and it has a lot of red. This is a seat that Trump would have won by over 21 points, and this is a seat that Laura Kelly would have won by around 9 points. The third takes in the southern half of Johnson County and then goes in through all these really Republican areas. Again, this is a seat Trump wins by 15. This is actually the most Democratic district in the state. And Laura Kelly wins this by around 7 points. Finally, the fourth is around Wichita, and that does not matter because it's a Republican area, so it's not going to vote for a Democrat. So if you look at the results presidential election, all of these are very red, and the third is pretty red. But it does kind of implode, actually, or sorry, pull up the 2012. So that's 2016. 2012, the second is actually more Democratic in this one for some reason. All of these are pretty competitive in that map. And then finally, Laura Kelly actually wins every district in the state, so you could call it the Laura Kelly Mander. But again, Laura Kelly was up against Chris Kobach, so that does not count. Republicans would probably be favored in every district in the state. The third would probably be a problem long term because Johnson County is trending to the left. But overall, I think Democrats would be very unhappy with this map, and Republicans would probably hold a 5-0 majority. Those are my two maps. I think they're a pretty good balance of the two possibilities in Kansas.
Looks good.
Yeah, I like them.
Both of them.
Yeah.
I guess I'll show mine. So I just did a fair map, so I'll show that. I did not do a gerrymander. So I just did one fair map here. So as you can see, I'll take a look at the first district here. So in order to crack
a fair map? Oh, yeah, that kind of fair map.
Oh, I don't know why you guys are laughing, but I'm just going to move on. So in order to crack Sharice David's seat, I effectively stretched the Tracy Mann seat, and here's Saline County, so it is in the district. He does live in the district. I took Riley County out because that was unfairly influencing the first and moving it towards the left. So instead, I swapped it and put Wyandotte County in. So I stretched the first up to Wyandotte, which is Kansas City. As you can see, heavily Democratic. Pretty much the main reason for the third being difficult for Republicans to crack in its current form and bring back into their fold. So now that's in the first. As you can see, the first heavily Republican, Hillary Clinton didn't even crack 30% here. So this would be safe Republican. And as you can see, Kansas City as a community of interest fits perfectly with the rest of rural Kansas out there in the great state. So we're going to move on to the second district now. As you can see, the second district also very Republican. The current second voted for Trump by about 19 points. This one's not technically as Republican, mainly because it's taking in Riley County, which is more Democratic. It's also taking in Jefferson County, Douglas County, and Shawnee County, which have begun to trend more toward Democrats in recent years. But I put them in with their good friends down here in rural Kansas to help make the district more Republican and ensure that their voices are fairly represented in Congress by Jake LaTurner. Over here in the third district, I decided to give the Johnson Countyites a district where a Republican can come back because I feel like they need to express their inner self. And to do that, we had to get Wyandotte County out of the way and have them revert back to form of reluctantly voting for Republican candidates just because they don't want their taxes increased or people moving into their neighborhoods. So this takes in quite a few rural Republican counties down here. As you can see, Trump reliably getting in the 70s in terms of percentage of the vote here. But this district becomes about a Trump plus 10 district in 2016. There aren't any county splits in this district except a small one down here in Labette County, so I could pretty easily calculate what it would be this time around. Again, since Johnson County voted for Biden this time, it would be worth looking at. The seat would be more Democratic this time, but again, this seat is definitely an easier one for Republicans to win than the old one. And finally, the fourth district here takes into account Sedgwick County down here. And the rest of the district turns out to be a very Republican seat. Again, very competitive seat. Ron Estes definitely in a toss-up race here in the fourth district, which voted for Trump by about 27 points. So as you can see, overall, this map is a fair map for the Democrats. It generates essentially 4 Republican seats in most cycles, with all of them being either safe Republican or likely Republican.
Yeah, I think this is very fair. In fact, I think it's an inspired choice to connect liberal Kansas with the most liberal part of Kansas.
Exactly. That's the whole point of this map. So it effectively cracks the third district, which better reflects fairly a state that gave Trump 56% of the vote.
Oh gosh, that's good. I mean,
I mean,
if that's what fair is, then I'm the Pope, right?
well,
That's
that
what we call the reverse Stephen Wolf. The
Yeah, fair.
or the
That's
reverse of that, or the reverse of that Citizens for Fair Maps Twitter account, which is just
oh
putting up
god, yeah,
listen,
they're
I
funny.
don't see what's wrong. That map is fair.
again
Really.
liberal to liberal, very fair. I think it's
Liberal to
also
liberal.
very fair to connect the
Just think, if
traders.
you
And
live in a city called Liberal, Kansas, and you're connected with the most liberal part of Kansas, that is a community of interest. I think
Well,
you can justify that in court, just like Louis Gohmert can justify banning the Democrats in court by saying the Constitution says states will govern themselves under a Republican form of government.
I think
yeah,
we can move on to Armin's map or maps. I presume he has
yeah.
multiple. Yeah.
So I have three here. Two I made today, and one I had up from a while back that I thought would be cool to share. So yeah, why don't I share screen again? So I have a
There we
okay.
go.
So
Screen is
here's our fair map.
It's pretty similar to the current map. That was interesting.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think the current map with one Democratic, one very very likely Republican seat, and then two super safe Republican seats. I think that accurately reflects the partisan breakdown and the political geography of Kansas pretty well. So going in order here, Tracy Mann lives somewhere in this beautiful expanse of cornfields and all that. And yeah, I mean, presumably he lives in one of these counties, and if he doesn't, I mean, this is Trump plus what 46. I mean, Laura Kelly got 37% here, which wow, I'm impressed. But as you can see, it's R plus 25. So again, super safe Republican. There's nothing super interesting to look at here. Two, I mean, it essentially maintains its current form. I mean, it takes in some of these counties closer to Wichita, but it's primarily a Topeka, Lawrence based seat with a little bit of southeastern Kansas, as well as these ancestral Dems up in Atchison, as well as Donovan and Brown counties. And it's Trump plus 18, so again, super, super safe. I mean, you can see, you can see the Democrats' vote shares, gone down over 3 straight elections. And, Biden might have clawed some of that back, but, this is still going to likely be a Republican seat. And LaTurner lives in Topeka, so this seat's going to be his to lose.
And you'll notice that his third has the exact same split my third did, which is taking out that one small town at the end of Johnson County.
Yeah, I mean, the third, it's at the corner of a state. Like in a fair map, there's really not much you're going to do to it, right? So, I mean, Sharice Davids is here. This is Clinton plus 3. It's likely Biden plus 10 or something like that. This is a likely Democratic seat, probably safe as the trends go. And I mean, you see Laura Kelly did extremely well here. Because lots of these Johnson County college-educated suburbanites, and also these dudes with excellent ribs in Kansas City, in Wyandotte County, who are now, very staunchly Democratic, as we can see here.
The Aaron Coleman folks.
Oh Lordy, do not remind me. So then finally we have the 4th district, which is centered around Wichita, and the various counties in its metro, as well as some rurals to balance out population. This is Ron Estes, and he has Trump plus 25. It's a super safe seat. Wichita is getting a tiny little bit more Democratic each year, but still a long way to go. Kansas is fun to draw because of these tiny little counties, which make it like fitting pieces of a puzzle together that you don't have to split too many. So that is the fair map. Now time to do the unfair map. So feast your eyes, everybody. Look at that. I don't know who lives where, but I guess we could go in order. So the first one, I cracked Topeka and Manhattan and put it in with whatever cows and sheep
Armin,
live
I
here.
say I can help you with who lives where.
Okay.
Tracy Mann lives in Saline County, which is not in the first, but
Yeah, so Tracy Mann and Ron Estes are going to have to fight each other in a primary, which,
How you managed to double bunk them even in this map?
which, from the perspective of a truly fair map, a fair map does not care about where incumbents live.
This is a fair map. I mean, just look at it.
It's completely
I
fair.
mean, again,
yeah.
it connects liberal to the most liberal part of Kansas. So again, traditionally, that's a very fair match.
Where is liberal?
Exactly.
It does.
And hey, I mean, it voted for Trump by double digits, so logically that means it should have 0 Democratic seats.
Well, yeah. So well, I mean, so you see, this is Trump plus 17, Trump plus 17, Trump plus 22, and Trump plus 27. So none of these seats are actually going to flip ever. It's really just a matter of shuffling around population. I mean, the only county split I have is just cracking Johnson once, because if you don't crack Johnson, then you risk a dummy man. They're too much. But yeah, no, this here, I mean, southeastern Kansas plus these Hispanic areas down here, plus I believe, yeah, Garden City. So Joe Exotic can run for Kansas's 3rd district when he gets out of federal prison.
After Trump
Joseph Maldonado Passage.
Joseph Maldonado Passage. Then 2 is this. I mean, there's really not a good way to describe these communities of interest because you just have to recognize that they're inherently fair. But yeah, this is the map. If you turn on the colors, that is what it looks like. And if you look at 2018, as we saw in Iowa, dummy mander. But
again, that's not a performance you're going to see very often, if not for the foreseeable future. The Laura Kelly performance is kind of the ceiling,
right? Unless the GOP nominates another white supremacist adjacent candidate like.
I mean, Laura Kelly and Tony Evers are arguably some of the most vulnerable governors going into 2022.
Yeah, but this is the second map, and so I mean, if we look at the analytics,
how does it do a minority right?
As you can see, it hates my map. But you see, I don't split counties, so therefore it's really fair, right?
Minority rights looking good there.
So then the third map I did was a hypothetical of how many counties could I stuff into the 1st district. And I don't know if you did it in yours, but this is an 81 county Kansas 1st district right here.
Good Lord. The biggest
this
big
is true.
first.
This is even bigger than this. Is like if you combined my 1st district and Eric's 1st district and made it into this.
Yeah, no, I actually there were 2 counties here that were 23,000 people, and I switched them out for this one county with 23,000 people. It was 80 originally, but as you can see, this would be a very fun primary map because I'm sure you'd have some regional differences between someone from southeastern Kansas and somebody like Selena is here, so Tracy Mann would get to run in this Trump plus 11 seat, which Trump plus 11, that could make a Republican sweat in a good enough Democratic year. 3 is Democratic as always. 4 is the same thing pretty much, and then there's 1. I mean, honestly, from a partisan breakdown standpoint, this is a pretty damn fair map.
That's a clear Democratic gerrymander.
Oh my gosh! But this is a truly giant district. I would love to see how someone would campaign in it. But yeah,
it really isn't every metropolitan area in the state. So I mean,
this is basically like a Kansas at large.
You have to just rent a private jet.
Yeah, they just call this Kansas at large House District. But yeah,
there's some people with private jets who could help. I mean, there's some Republicans with some private jet who could probably lend it.
For sure, yeah.
I'm thinking of one in particular.
The senator from Georgia.
Yes.
Oh Lord. Yeah. Well, you don't want Attila the Hun thundering across the plains of Kansas, do you now?
Oh yeah, I mean Senator Kelly Loeffler.
Yeah, but I believe Jared has joined us as well.
Welcome, Jared. Would you like to show us your maps?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I have 2, but one of them is my clear favorite. So I'll share my screen.
As you can tell, we like it when liberal connects with the most liberal parts of Kansas for obvious reasons.
Yeah, see, there's liberal though, and liberal is very much not in the same area as these liberal areas. I mean, this is R plus 26, which I mean,
I have another map I'll show at the end, which actually does connect liberal into a Democratic district. So,
ooh, nice, nice. All right, let me share my screen.
Yeah, but I mean, to represent all the communities in Kansas, you really do need 4 Republican districts. I mean, that's the best way to do it.
Can you all see that?
Oh, wow.
Oh,
okay.
Beautiful.
So
Wow.
So let me say a few things. So
This is my Christmas present.
So I call this, and it's not my title, but I call this Susan Weigel's dream map, because basically there's no way that a Democrat could have any chance of getting any of these districts unless Kansas turned blue, which is not really happening anytime soon on the federal level. Also, if you can look at the counties, there are no county splits except for Johnson County. And within Johnson County, I actually have tried to keep towns pretty much contiguous.
Wow.
And so really only Overland Park, if you look at the city lines, really only Overland Park is the main town that is split. So I'll go through this a little bit. Every single incumbent, including Jake LaTurner, who I believe he's from Crawford County, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so
one of the ancestrally Democratic counties in Kansas.
Right. So he's from Crawford County. So every single incoming congressman is going to have their own district here. So Tracy Mann from Saline County has the first right here. The third, which has Shawnee, home of Sharice Davids.
That first district was just amazing. Like, I don't know what to say. I'm just speechless.
Is liberal in it?
Yes,
liberal.
it is.
Liberal. Yeah, liberal is in this. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, right
And
over there.
Is it connected to Lawrence or a liberal area?
Liberal is connected.
Yep, Lawrence
to Lawrence. Look at that.
It passes the Eric Cunningham test.
Liberal and Lawrence are now in the red district.
If it doesn't connect liberal with liberal.
Yeah, so fortunately we have that going, but Sharice Davids is gone. I mean, she could try to switch parties, but probably not going to happen. But she's still in the third district, so that's good for her. And then, of course, Jake LaTurner's in the second, and then Ron Estes is in the fourth, which is the Wichita-based. So the fourth is slightly more Republican-leaning than the other districts, but considering it doesn't split counties, I think it's a pretty decent sacrifice to make in order to keep it
on this map. I'm just curious.
I'll show you. So it's a little bit asymmetrical how she did, just because her performance was asymmetrical. You can see she did better in the first by a long shot, but this is something I took into consideration. I'm not really that concerned, but I mean, obviously you have Topeka in here, you have Lawrence in here. I mean, take it as you will.
It's just whatever.
You don't have Manhattan, right? You have Manhattan in the first.
2023 will bring Governor Kobach into the fold.
We'll see about that. Yeah, so this is my map. I mean, that's pretty much it, I'm pretty sure, with that map. I have one more map.
Yeah, that's an excellent. That's a fantastic. That's the best gerrymander we've had so far.
Chris Kobach is very qualified. I mean, he went to Yale Law School.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He went to Yale Law School, and a judge told him that he had to take counseling sessions about how to apply law.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
But again, this is probably the best gerrymander we've seen so far. I think this is the one that would actually hold up.
Oh, yeah. No, Jared actually tried in his.
This is actually good. This is just the map we should put in place and then just freeze it.
The Sharon Weigelmander.
I mean, like we said earlier, this is actually an even better fair map than the previous ones.
They match all the statewide vote total almost perfectly.
It does match the statewide vote total.
Yeah, according to the Cunningham median district test, this is a perfect map.
They're all the median
let's just be honest. The median district test is the only real way of determining whether a map is fair.
Yeah, that's true.
I agree with that on that one there. Democrats will get away with it without the median district test.
Yeah. So this is obviously this has to be one of my more favorite maps out of pretty much all the maps I made, because it's just so aesthetically pleasing. So I'll see if I can try to send it into Susan Weigel, because I know that she would like a 4-0 map.
You'll be hired by the Kansas GOP instantly. You draw the maps.
And if not, and I don't know why they would want an alternative, but if they really want something like this is a pretty standard map. I think a 3-1. You have this sort of ugly looking thing that goes into Topeka, Lawrence, Johnson County, up to Wyandotte County. I mean, there's nothing really special here, but I really, otherwise I try to preserve the compactness and contiguity of the other districts. And so the big first has its big first. All the districts look pretty similar. Incumbency, or at least the incumbents, are going to be able to stay within their districts. So, nothing really too special with this one. So
and how does it vote in the governor race? I would assume all the other districts go for, except for maybe the fourth, go for Kobach. Wow.
Yeah. So I made this also to hold up in the governor's race, but you can see Wichita is pretty precarious for Republicans. But other than that, this will hold up. Chris Kobach
Yeah,
did
wow.
really badly in the big first, but he still wins it by a decent amount.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
enough.
you would have to like eat a baby on TV in 4K to lose the first district as a Republican.
Well, I think I like one. Who was it that one of my friends on Twitter, Elliot, one of his apparently in class, one of his professors said that Barbara Lee's vote against the Iraq War was very brave because it meant she could lose. And he literally told her, his professor in class, she could have literally caused 9/11 and would have won the district by 70 points.
I mean,
like,
yeah. I mean, it's like trying to expect Marjorie Taylor Greene to lose. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene could goose step down the National Mall and she'd still win by 40 points because of how Republican her district is.
She could probably literally threaten the electors and like would actually gain her votes. I mean,
Yeah, no, like that's the like when Roy Moore said that America was last great at the time when we had slavery. My honest thought was that this is probably going to get him more support from non-voters in Alabama.
again, these districts, it's really hard to compete in places like the first. The fact that Laura Kelly was able to do so in 2018, even though there was, a third party candidate,
Orman definitely helped her there. Yeah.
Yeah, Orman. I think
Oh, for sure.
I think people assume the Orman votes would have all gone to Laura Kelly, but I don't think that's necessarily correct. Because Orman went to great pains in his previous race to cast himself as a conservative-leaning person, and then in 2018 he was actually running the same sort of campaign. He just kind of had to lost steam at the end because obviously Democrats had a credible candidate. I think it's actually not unlikely that a lot of those votes for Orman in places out in the first were people who would have otherwise voted Republican.
That's possible.
But yeah, those are our maps. Did you have anything from Iowa? I know we went over it earlier, but if you don't, that's fine.
Oh, I can quickly show something from Iowa.
Yeah, because we went over our Iowa versions earlier. There's only a couple variations of Iowa because you have the one that connects Des Moines to Cedar or to Cedar Rapids, I think, that connects Des Moines to Iowa City, and then you have the one that just tries to get rid of all the Democrats. So that's basically the only couple variations that you have in Iowa.
Right. So I'll quickly show two of my maps for Iowa. So I'll share my screen again.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I did sort of both of those.
Yeah, and I personally love drawing small states like these because there's a lot of arguments over what a community of interest is in a state with 4 districts. How do you divide that fairly? I think West Virginia is going to be tough to draw because West Virginia, it's losing a district. So what do you draw? Do you include both of the panhandles together? Do you have one stretch the northern half and one stretch the southern half? Like there's lots of different ways you can do things.
Right, absolutely.
You revoke the statehood of West Virginia.
Well,
population
we should just get rid of one person, one vote, so that we have the votes in Virginia worth 1/5 of the votes in West Virginia.
Don't give the Supreme Court any ideas,
Just give Fairfax County, Alexandria, and Falls Church back to D.C. And
get this. Reinstitute the county unit system in Georgia.
Oh, God.
That way Fulton County gets 6 votes and freaking Appling County with 20,000 people has 2. Multiply that by 150.
You laugh, but Mississippi basically had that, and they just got rid of it because they realized it was dumb. But
that was the Electoral College State House District rule thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so
yeah, I'm sure I just got on, so I haven't seen y'all's maps on Iowa, but I'm sure some iterations are pretty similar to this. This is the 2018 gubernatorial numbers, as a lot of us know, or if you don't know, Kim Reynolds won the governorship while only winning 1 of 4 congressional districts. This is somewhat similar to the current, with the exception of the 3rd and 4th districts. The 3rd is meant to consolidate Democratic votes. So you can see it takes in more of the Des Moines metropolitan area. It takes in Dallas County, which Trump almost lost this year. So it sort of alleviates that pressure. But this is all contiguous with respect to counties. There are no county splits. The 4th is safely Republican. And then the 1st and the 2nd are very competitive. But I imagine that, given Republican gains there this year, that would be the same with this map. And if you look at 2016, just to quickly show you, Trump won 3 out of 4 districts. So the 1st and the 2nd fairly narrowly, and then the 4th quite handedly. And then this is sort of my version of the Des Moines to Iowa City corridor, which makes a Democratic vote sink if you can try to make it. And the problem with Iowa is that, currently we're trying to make sure that we are not splitting any counties in Iowa. And so this can create some real difficulties in terms of trying to pack Democratic votes if that's what you're trying to do, because you can't really make a district that contains Des Moines, Iowa City, and Cedar Rapids. It is too much in population. So what you can do is create a Des Moines to Iowa City one that I did, and then just take in some various peripheral counties that just make it get up to the population count, and then you just use the remaining area to make 3 safely Republican districts. That's sort of what I did here. So yeah, nothing too special there.
Yep, those look pretty good. And before we go, I have one map to show, which is my liberal Mander. It's a liberal. It's a seat that connects to liberal that is also itself liberal. So one, as you can see here, it has all of liberal.
Wow.
And also has all of Wichita and all of Kansas City.
Just saying, when we get to Massachusetts, I'm going to be applying this exact same logic.
Yeah, and so and then the rest of it connects Lawrence to all this area, and it's nuts. Obviously, the liberal Mander does really well in the gubernatorial race. Laura Kelly wins the 1st district by 23 points. That will make it the most liberal seat in the state. So I figure, I figure that's a very fair map right there. certainly one worth considering in the future.
Yeah,
I would not want to be one of
in the liberal corridors, I'll call it.
I would not want to be one of those residents living between liberal and whatever the Democratic Johnson County is.
That's going to be Adam Frencher is going to argue a Miller v. Johnson illegality there in that district.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the that's Iowa and Kansas. That's 2 smaller states. We'll probably continue bundling these smaller states in the future. I think up next we've got Kentucky, Louisiana, and Maine are some of the states up ahead. Pretty boring states, all things considered. Louisiana.
Maine is interesting. It's just dumb on Dave's redistricting app.
Yeah, Louisiana. The thing with Louisiana, people, I'll just go ahead and say it ahead of time since we got a little bit of time left before 1:30, which will probably we'll close it off then. Louisiana, people like to talk about whether or not it'll get a 2nd Democratic district. The thing I like to say is that John Bell Edwards can either get a budget or he can get a 2nd Democratic district. He's not going to get both. Like, it's the likelihood of a 2nd Democratic seat in Louisiana, even though it will be fair, it's just not happening. I don't even think Cedric Richmond or whoever takes that seat over after him would be happy with a district in New Orleans that's actually kind of majority white. Would ultimately be how it would turn out. But I mean, Kentucky will be interesting though, given the possibility of a 6-0 Republican map. Given there is a supermajority in Kentucky now, all of the rural Democrats, except for literally I think there's 2 rural Democrats left in the House from Eastern Kentucky.
Well, I mean, they're just fake Democrats anyway.
Well, they survived, so I mean, credit to them. But those are the states we'll be looking at in the future. I think Maryland is up on that list as well, which is going to be interesting. Massachusetts, Michigan, all the M states and the N states, which there are a lot of. So keep an eye out for that in the future. Yeah, Montana, that's going to gain the district. People forget about that, but that's going to be a really interesting one, given Republicans have a trifecta in Montana at this point. So again, we'll be. I guess we'll have an update probably next week as well at some point for another episode. Stay tuned to that, and thank you guys for tuning in. I guess we'll see you on next week or whenever our next episode is of Redistricting Radar. But happy holidays to you guys, and thanks for showing up.
Thank you, guys.
Yep.
Thank you.